Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we'll be talking about a report coming out discussing the Celtics more likely to shop Jrue Holiday this offseason than Derrick White. And this is something I have said repeatedly, that unless they won another championship, and even if they did win another championship, which obviously we know didn't happen, they were going to have to make a decision on Jrue Holiday, because seemingly Derrick White, Peyton Pritchard are the two guys that they're probably going to go moving forward, as they're cheaper, younger, and are kind of able to be yin-yangs with one another. And then they would probably bring in a third guy or draft somebody, due to the fact that Jrue Holiday's contract's a bit rich, and he's not a bad player. He's still phenomenal, even if he's lost a step or half a step. So this report is coming from the Marc Stein line that, quote, "The Celtics' precise determination to keep their various veterans is difficult to calculate soon after defending champions round 2 exit to the Knicks in this year's playoffs, and with the devastating loss of Jayson Tatum to an Achilles rupture. But the early projections in circulations suggest both, Jrue Holiday being the guy that they would want to shop, and Derrick White being the one that they want to keep. And most rival teams continue to regard Kristaps Porzingis as the most movable Boston veteran, thanks to him having a $30.7 million expiring contract. Plus, the Celtics don't want to be the ones who have to negotiate that deal. As great as he was for them, they were pretty solid without him, and I think they're going to probably go center by committee moving forward, especially if they bring back Luke Cornett on a cheap dollar and maybe draft a guy like Jean Beringer. Now, the other reason is Porzingis had some, illness, which seemed like mono, that couldn't let him play more than 20 minutes a game. And let's just move ahead and talk about the teams that could trade for Jrue Holiday. The worst team in terms of assists were the Orlando Magic, but they have Jalen Suggs, and I think they're more interested in trading Cole Anthony for somehow Anthony Simons. They want like an Anthony Simons guy, and I think getting Jrue Holiday would basically be the veteran version of Jalen Suggs. The Sixers, I don't think that if they're going to get a guard, it would be VJ in the draft. Houston, they're going to bring back Fred VanVleet on a cheaper contract, and they already know what Fred will do. And Fred's younger, I believe. Not Portland, but Charlotte. I mean, Portland's one of the lower ones, and I don't think Portland, who already technically had him, would keep him. And to me, Charlotte, would you bring him in as the veteran presence? And that would really only be if they were dumping, I guess, Miles Bridges on the Celtics, which I doubt the Celtics would bring in Miles Bridges. So the Washington Wizards are the next ones, which I could see the Wizards doing if you convince them with some sort of asset. Like the Wizards would take on Jrue Holiday and try to reroute him somewhere eventually, or play him out as the veteran with Jordan Poole. Like, that's not preposterous. Same thing with Brooklyn. Would the Clippers be interested in it? Because that allows James Harden to go off ball. Now, how do you get the contract there? It would have to be like Norman Powell, and you would have to get a third team involved, because the whole deal would be for the Celtics to shed money. So once we start to hear interested teams, I think that's when this becomes a lot more interesting. Because realistically, I mean, you could even think maybe the Mavericks or like I already said, the Clippers would be interested. If the Bucks were able to somehow flip Damian Lillard into Jrue, and then have Dame get sent to the Nets to get bought out, which I would say would be very difficult to do, but would be the most ideal thing to do, ideal thing to happen to them if they could try to keep Giannis that way. But I doubt that would happen. Dallas Mavericks, if they could bring in Jrue for Daniel Gafford, and it would be probably Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington somehow. But again, these would all have to be 3-team trades, because the Celtics wouldn't. I mean, the Celtics might want Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington because they're both expirings. But I think when you look at the rest of the deals, like I said, the Wizards, Hornets, and Nets would only receive him in a 3-team scenario where they would either keep him until they want to get rid of him, or think that he would be a part of their long-term plans as a veteran presence. Now, you just would have to find a team that's desperate enough to get an older perimeter player who's clearly in decline and it is not a true point guard. To me, that's where I agree it becomes difficult, as if the Wizards were doing anything, it would be built around probably Rashawn Holmes and Marcus Smart, as Marcus isn't expiring and Rashawn Holmes has very little to no guaranteed money. Brooklyn just has a bunch of cap space, but why would they give up their cap space for that? That would have to be a later offseason move. Pelicans, they already have to figure out CJ McCollum and DeJounte Murray, who popped his Achilles. So it becomes even more frustrating. Another idea would be, again, would you try to see if Danny Ainge would want to dump the contracts of a Jordan Clarkson? And I mean, they have a few, a Jordan Clarkson, a Colin Sexton, but why would you want more guards? Ideally, if you could flip Jrue Holiday into John Collins and then you trade Kristaps Porzingis somewhere else, now you got John Collins, who I think would be perfect for this team. And you go ahead and you look to dump Kristaps Porzingis. Let's say he goes to Brooklyn. Who do you give up to? Who does Brooklyn give up? I mean, I think in this scenario, you wouldn't actually send him to Brooklyn unless you could even get Utah to take on Mr. Porzingis, and then you try to bring in their other contracts, which would be my dog just did something, but yeah, no, their other contracts would be Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson. That would they be interested in those? Maybe not the Celtics necessarily, but trying to find other teams that would be possible. And there's still sign trades that are possible that you could do, but I think looking at John Collins and stuff would be definitely interesting. I think a big man and some shooters. Now, what shooters? Bring back Steve McKinley would be hilarious. Look, Utah is a team that really intrigues me now. And the Nets, the whole thing, if the Nets were involved, let's say Kristaps Porzingis, I think they would trade Kristaps Porzingis for Nick Claxton. Unless they wanted to put Nick Claxton, which I could see them, would you keep Cam Johnson then? Or would you be trading for Cam Johnson if you're the Celtics? I think that becomes the whole other thing. So let me hear your thoughts on that one.